Welcome to Woodturning 301, Lesson 3. And in this lesson we're going to do something, as I said before, slightly backwards from the way we did it in the last two lessons. Instead of mounting this piece of wood in such a way that this becomes the outside of the bowl and this the inside, I'm going to do it backwards. So the first thing I have to do is do some layout on this. So on the back side, which is where the spur drive is going to go, I've got to get through the bark. So I took a Forstner bit and cut through the bark, and I needed to center that. So I measured the length, 7.5, and I positioned it halfway. I can't measure this very well, so I came around the whole diameter of the piece, and I come out to about 10 inches, and that makes it 5 inches this way. So what I've done is found the center on this side. On the other side, I did the same thing. I marked the length and the width, and I put a little X here. Now, we're going to make adjustments as we go, but at least we have a starting point. So what we're going to do now is set this up on the lathe and begin. Before I do, I want to tell you one other thing. I'm using a 2-point drive rather than the standard 4-point because I'm going to want to be able to move this bowl back and forth like this. And the 4-point will work, but it limits my ability to adjust the alignment of the pieces a little bit. So let me clear the deck, set this up, and I want to show you the setup again right before we start to turn. Okay, what I've done, I put the lathe between centers, centering it in the headstock with the 2-point spur drive, and roughly on the mark in the tailstock. Now this piece is going to need to adjust a little bit. So what I did off camera was I checked where this wing was next to my finger, and I adjusted it back and forth this way until it looked as if these two wings were at the same height. The length is a little different because these pieces weren't cut really square. So I now have it set up so that I can make adjustments, and I want to turn the spur drive so the points are this way, so I can make this kind of an adjustment. And I've got my spur set vertically. Tailstock is locked. Now I'm going to put some pressure on it and really seat that spur into the wood. This is going to be the inside of the bowl. This is the back. So what we got to do now is turn just like we always do. We're going to shape this into a bowl. We're going to create a tenon on the back side. And this is just normal work, but it's done differently. So as this edge comes down, one of the things I'm going to be doing is watching to see that it comes down on both sides the same, and here the same. So that's what we're going to watch for as we turn this into a rough bowl shape and create a tenon. So I won't show you all the cuts, but we'll show you most of getting started, where we're kind of banging around with a lot of air. And then we'll show you finishing it up and maybe stop in the center when I'm checking to see about alignment. So here we go. I've got the lathe speed turned all the way down to low, and we'll be right back as soon as we get all the check on the setup done. Okay, the setup's done. Check the power on the lathe. I've got the volume turned all the way down to as low as possible. Probably about there. That's about 700 RPM. So now remember, we're turning something that has bark on it. Bark flies, bark hurts, hunks come off, hunks hurt. So I've got my glasses for chips, and I got my face shield for any big pieces that might come off. The tool I'm going to be using for most of the work is my standard deep fluted bowl gouge. So here we go with our cuts. Just like in the earlier lessons, as we cut through these rough spots, we're going to have to stop and readjust our setup. That's pretty normal. With a piece like this, where there's air and wood, be sure to turn the lathe off when you make that adjustment. Be sure to turn the lathe off. You'll understand why if you don't. Well, first thing I notice, I hear a lot of banging on my face shield, which means bark is coming off. So let's take a look at where we are progress-wise. I've cut into solid wood on this side, just barely, and I'm off by, looks like about 1/8 of an inch. So this side needs to come down about 1/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to do, or half of that, 1/16 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is loosen the spur drive and move it slightly to the left. Now let's see how we're doing up here as we approach the wing. Cutting the bark there, and that alignment looks pretty doggone good because we set that up earlier from these two edges. So what I'm going to do is continue to bring this down and up until I hit bark and get the bottom shaped where I want. So more of the same. You noticed a couple of times I had to stop, tighten the tailstock. 2-point spur drive, green wood, it's biting in deeper and deeper and deeper. So I have to keep tightening the tailstock. Okay, back to work. Well, we're almost to the top. It looks like this one is a little bigger than the other one, so that means I need to cut more here. So I want to bring the piece more this direction, more towards my tool. So again, I'm going to loosen the tailstock, and in the other plane, now make another adjustment. This adjustment process is the process of getting this thing to come out as symmetrical as I possibly can. Sometimes they're adjusted so these are not symmetrical. That may be a choice. But I'm shooting for a symmetry in this particular blank. Tighten as much as I can. Close up the gap. Well, I'm pretty close to the top, and These two are pretty close. One thing with some species of wood where the bark tends to be a little loose, making this cut from the base towards the top may actually pull away a little bit of bark right here. So when you get close to the top of this wing, this is bay laurel, the bark is on really, really tight. It's not going to be a problem. But sometimes I may come over here and cut actually backwards from the top of this wing down. The reason is to push the bark towards the wood and to prevent it from being torn off. If you tear off a big piece, you have two choices. Try to find a way to patch it back in, maybe sometimes glue does, or tear all the bark off and do a natural edge bowl that has no bark rim. It's a choice. Right now, we're doing pretty good. We have bark really tight. This wood was cut fairly recently, and this species has a tendency to hold its bark on, so it's not too much of a problem. I'm going to get up to here, and then I'm going to start working towards getting a better shape and a tenon. But I just wanted to make sure about the balance. These two wings, pretty close. This one right here is a little higher than this one, which means I could make another adjustment. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep moving on. But you understand, to balance this, you measure. I'm off about a 1/16 or less of an inch. I could make that adjustment, but I'm not going to. Here, we'll just keep going. So the bowl blank now is pretty well balanced, and being balanced means I can continue to increase the speed a little bit more. So I'm going to bring the cut up to the top of the bark here, and then I'm going to start working into a shape of the form and for the tenon. Change speed. Change feet position, and then change my feet. Okay, I'm going to flatten the bottom off on right here. Just full cut. So we completed the wings, low and high, and now what we have to do is complete a shape, and this definitely is not the shape I want. It looks like it needs a lot of work. So I'm going to bring this from about here, where the tenon will be, on up. So most of the work now needs to be cut in this area right here. Eye protection. Head protection. Okay, back to it. More speed, up to 1200 RPM now. I'm going to define the area for the tenon and then come back to shape. So I have a tenon. It's not a tenon, but it's where the tenon's going to go. And I put a little mark right here, which is going to be the foot. So now I know the shape is from here to the rim. And I can look at the side and I can see where I need to do more work. But I'm getting there, and I'll finish the tenon in a couple minutes. I wanted to finish that last cut before it started to spin, and it was unfortunate that I couldn't quite do that. Now, back to it again. Close my distance again. And as I've gotten around her, I've been able to pick the speed up. And I said 1200. Let's see what we can do now. Probably. Yeah, right about 1400 now. So I think that's probably as fast as I'm going to go. But now that it's in balance, I can turn the speed up. Cuts get easier. Surface looks better. A lot of good things happen when you're turning at higher speeds. Okay, ready to go. I'm going to switch hands. So I'm doing some shear cuts, and what I'm doing is working this area from below the wing down to the base to get that curve relatively where I want it. From here to the top of the wing isn't done yet. I'll do the tenon maybe in a minute, but I want to finish this off. So I've been doing shear cuts to work on that area. So now I need to come from the top of the wing down to that spot and make it look pleasing. The beauty of turning back here at the studio again is I have a brown floor that I'm looking at. I have a light colored piece of wood, so the contrast between this and the floor allows me to see that shape evolve very, very easily. I have a nice curve here and a nice curve here, and they don't relate to each other at all. So I've got to take a little out here and a little bit more out of here and start blending this from here all the way down to the base. So I'll keep working on that cut. When I'm turning a natural edge bowl, I'm cutting wood, air, up in this area. So as fast as I can go, my tool tends to sink into that open space much less easily. It feels to me at, let's see, what am I doing here? About 1800 now. Yeah, about 1800. As I cut up into the open wing, I'm not feeling this tool wanting to drop in at all. It's doing really fine. So we're going to cut from the bark edge back against the grain. Be really sure where you put the tool when you start. It's so easy to catch. So I start out here with air, and I just back into the cut little pushes at a time until I finally find where the wood is. So I have a shape. It's it's roughly okay. I'm going to do a little cleanup and then we're going to work on the tenon. Okay, we'll call that good enough now. So the tenon has to fit my chuck. And I know I'm going to be using a Stronghold Talon chuck. So this piece here needs to be just right at about 2 inches. And I've done enough of these, I kind of know what 2 inches look like. So, but now what I need to do is perfect this. And I'm going to get my tool rest in here so I can work on this. This needs to go straight down, and this piece across here needs to be dead flat. That's really all it took. I had the rough shape, so I wanted to get this edge vertical, and I wanted to be sure this corner down here was clean, and I had a good registration surface here coming across this way. So now we'll reset. We're going to put the chuck on, turn this around, put the bowl in the chuck, and then begin to work on the inside. So reset, and I'll come back and show you my new setup in a couple minutes. Okay, I've finished my setup again. So all I've done is taken and put this in the chuck. And in terms of aligning these wings, upper and lower, that's a past done thing. Once it's in here, we have no more adjustments to that. So now it's just a matter of hollowing this out. Now, on natural edge pieces like this, you've got to decide how thick you want the wall. If I turn it really thin, I won't have much of a bark showing, and that may not be as interesting to see as when it's just a little bit thicker. So I'm going to come down to some point, and I'm going to start making some judgments about how thick is thick enough. But I don't want to go really thin for two reasons. Number one, I want to be able to see the bark, which I said. Number two, as it gets thin, this becomes unsupported here, and it becomes very difficult to make cuts on this when this little tiny piece of wood is sticking up there by itself. So we'll play this by ear and see how it comes out. Okay, glasses, face shields. I've set the tool rest straight across, and we are clear. And we'll turn the lathe on. Okay, got our lathe back on again. Now, it's a little out of round on the back. And it's out of round for one of two reasons. It's green wood and it's moved. Or the alignment of that tenon wasn't perfect. I believe we have a situation where the wood, being green, is doing what green wood does. It dries out, it shrinks, it moves. So I'm going to make a cleanup cut on the back side before I go in. I could do that or I could ignore it. And if I ignored it, nobody would ever know. It's not that bad. It appears to be the amount it's out is maybe a 1/16. I don't think I'm going to do it. I think it's okay, and you can go back in. If it was much worse than that, I would definitely do it. We're clear. Face shield. There's 1400 RPM. We'll go with that for a while. Same bowl gouge. noticing something that's unusual? Did you see those last couple of cuts? Can you see how high my hand is relative to the blade? That's because this tool rest will not go down low enough to allow me to come straight across center. I had to reach under to do that. That's unacceptable. This post just will not go down farther. So I'm going to stop for a second, go find another tool rest, and then come back and get this lined up properly so I'm not cutting in some strange posture. Well, I went over and stole this off of a different lathe, and as you can see, it clearly goes low enough. So now I'm going to get it up here so I can have that tool go right through dead center where it needs to be. Lock it down. And now I have a tool rest that's going to allow me to make the cut. When you have a problem like that, don't work around it, go fix it. So now I can pass through the center and we'll go right back to where we were before. Speed should still be, still about 1400. We're all set. Back to the cuts. That's so much nicer. My goal now is to cut down below the wing, but not all the way to the bottom. I want as much mass across here as I can until I finish turning these wings. Once I got from here up to the top finished, to the thickness I want, shaped right, then I'll go clean out the bottom. So I'm now going to work my way out. Now see, that's not an unattractive thickness right there, if that's what interests you. I want to make it thinner than that. And what I'm starting to do is now, as I cut, watching the outside, trying to get my tool to follow the outside curve on the inside, as we've done on other bowls. So back to work. So it's a matter of what looks right. The other interesting thing is, this is how thick the wall is, because that's flat. This is the same thickness, but look here, it looks like it's half again thicker. It's because it's no longer a flat surface, it's an angled surface, and I'm always going to have this effect of this appearing to be wider than this, because it's at a 45-degree angle where this is at a 90-degree angle to this plane. It's life. That's a nice thickness. I like that. So I'm trying to make this last cut as carefully as I could so that I have a nice smooth surface in here. Sanding these wings inside and out is going to be difficult. It's also the end grain, which is a hard spot to work on. So now I'm going to go on down. I've established my thickness. It's getting a little thicker towards the bottom, but that's normally the way I cut. So now I'm going to also turn my tool rest into the piece, carefully avoiding the wings, and continue my cuts. I had to turn the volume up. I guess that makes a difference. About 1700 now. I can't put my hand on the outside like I would on other bowls. The reason is obvious, I guess. But now, I'm going to pick up from here and just work down that rest of that inch. Let's see where we are. I think this is time for some calipers. So in the last video, you saw me use these pieces of aluminum wire, which worked really fine. There's my wall thickness. I'm going to open it up just a little wider. And these are constantly adjustable. So it appears to be fairly uniform till I get to about here. Don't like these? Let's try another kind of caliper. This is one I haven't shown you before, but it does the same thing. As these brass balls move, I can read in 1/16 how far it is here. So I can do this as I slide down. Down there it is. There's 1/16 right there, but it's 1/16 thicker right there. And down here it's 1/8 thicker. So I already knew that, but I'm going to clean this up here and then take more out of the bottom. And I can do this with my gouge, but the bevel angle on this thing is not really good for getting down here at the bottom. What happens is I am engaging the edge, but not able to rub the bevel because of the need to come over here. So I think what I'm going to do is change to another tool. I have a round nose scraper. This happens to be a box scraper, but that's fine. Raise my tool rest a bit. Go down angle to the center. And now I'm going to start here and come around and bring that all the way down. Face shield. I'm going to check it again with my other set of calipers. Okay, there's a bump right there, and it's right there. I know where it is. Now I'll try and take it all the way to the bottom. I just want to finish up this area in here. Okay, that's got it. I'm going to make one pull up the wing. Making cuts on the wing after we've gone down in the bottom has to be done very, very carefully. Still feel the bump right down there. Fingers are pretty good testers. Oh yeah, yeah, we've got it. Now a little bit on the bottom. Checking my wing clearance. Okay, pretty close. And I can't caliper this very easily, but I can tell that it comes down around a curve here, and it's rising in the center just a little bit. So I'm working from the center out to about here. Just about got it. Okay, so what I would do now, take the piece, put some finish on it, and like all the other bowls, eventually rechuck it and take this tenon off. So let's summarize what we just ended up going through here. I used basically 2 tools, actually 3 if I want to include the skew. Almost everything was done with the bowl gouge. I finished off with the round nose scraper, found one that happened to fit. And I used the bowl gouge for almost everything, a round nose scraper and a skew chisel to clean up and perfect this tenon. And we aligned while we're still working between centers to get these 2 wings at the right height and these 2 low wings at the right height. And we did that by first marking out the centers mathematically, ruler, tape, so on. That gives us a starting point. But when you get it on the lathe, using your finger or ruler, you can check the height and then make these slight adjustments back and forth. Working green wood, and I was working with a 2-point spur drive, and as you could tell, it dug in a lot just because the wood was soft, and that's what it tends to do. So constantly keep checking that your tailstock is tight enough to maintain that alignment. Starting this thing on a screw chuck or something like that does not allow for any ability to make these adjustments. You have to be, quote, between centers, between the spur drive and a live center. It's the only way I can make these necessary adjustments. So for this bowl, the only difficulty would be, and these cuts came out pretty clean, it's the wood allowed for that. This portion here, inside and out, is end grain. And that's the area that's going to be most difficult to sand. So if I'm using a sanding pad or electrical sander and the lathe is running, I'm fine until I get up to here. Once I'm hitting air and wood, I can't do it that way. It becomes a hand sanding technique. So this is hand sanding work in here, and it's hand sanding work in here. And then the proper finishes, whatever is suitable to you, back on jam chuck, vacuum chuck, whatever technique you intend to use. So, Woodturning 301, lesson number 3, concludes our series of working with green wood. Remember to do it in 2 stages to allow it to dry when we do a piece like this. This is going to warp, but I tell you, with the shape like this, probably won't be able to notice it very much. Thanks for watching. Come back and see us for our next series of classes. Stay safe.